I still remember the smell of roses mixed with cheap coffee when everything started going wrong. And I mean really wrong. Like that quiet kind of wrong that creeps into your chest and sits there heavy. You know, the kind where everyone else is smiling and you feel like you are drowning standing still. That was the day of my sister's wedding. And no, this is not one of those cute family stories where everything works out with hugs and tears. This is the day I realized blood does not always mean loyalty, and respect is not something you are owed just because you share a last name. My name is Emma, and for most of my life I was the quiet one, the helper, the fixer, the girl who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. I was the sister who lent money without asking when it would come back. The sister who babysat canceled plans and smiled through disrespect because I thought family meant sacrifice. My sister Lily was the opposite, loud, confident, beautiful in a way that filled rooms. She had that energy people followed without asking questions. And growing up, it was always like that. Lily first, Lily loud, Lily praised, and me somewhere in the background holding coats and cleaning messes. But I never hated her. Not really, I admired her. I protected her even when she hurt me because that is what I told myself good sisters do. The wedding was supposed to be a fresh start. That is what everyone kept saying. New chapter, new life, new happiness. I bought into that idea like a fool. I helped plan it, helped pay for parts of it, helped calm her down during meltdowns where she would scream about flowers being the wrong shade of white. I ignored the way she snapped at me. I ignored the way she talked over me like I was invisible. I ignored the jokes she made about me being single and boring in front of her friends because I told myself it was stress wedding. Stress. People say things they do not mean. The venue was expensive, like way out of budget expensive. And I remember thinking it was funny because just 2 years ago Lily cried on my couch saying she could not afford rent, and I handed her my savings without hesitation that money was part of this wedding now. And I did not even get a thank you. The morning of the wedding was chaos. Makeup brushes flying, people yelling about missing shoes, and I was there from sunrise running errands, holding dresses, fetching food, making sure nothing fell apart. I was wearing a simple dress, not flashy because Lily told me she wanted the attention on her, which I understood. But something about the way she said it felt sharp. Then came the seating. I did not think much of it. At first I trusted her, why wouldn't I? She was my sister after all. But when the coordinator handed me the card and I read my name, my stomach dropped. Emma, kitchen staff table. I laughed at first, because it had to be a mistake. I actually looked around expecting someone to laugh with me like, oh yeah, wrong card, funny joke. But nobody did. The coordinator looked confused, then awkward, then apologetic and said Lily approved the final seating. Personally, I walked toward Lily, my heart pounding, not angry yet, just hurt. Confused, trying to understand. She was glowing in her dress, surrounded by bridesmaids, champagne in hand, laughing like nothing in the world could touch her. I pulled her aside quietly because I did not want a scene. I never wanted a scene. I showed her the card and asked, hey, I think there is a mistake. She looked at it for maybe 2 seconds, then shrugged. Yeah, that's where you are sitting. I remember blinking like my brain needed a second to catch up with my ears. What do you mean, that's where I am sitting? She sighed like I was inconveniencing her, like I was being dramatic, and said, Emma, relax. It is just for dinner. The main tables are full, and you do not really fit the vibe up there. Those words did something to me. They stuck in my chest like a cold stone. You do not fit the vibe. I asked her if she was serious, and she laughed. Actually laughed and said, don't be so sensitive, you should be grateful you even got a seat. This wedding is expensive. Grateful after everything, after the money, the time, the years of support. She leaned in closer and lowered her voice and said something that changed everything. Do not embarrass me today, okay? This day is not about you. Then she walked away. I stood there frozen while music played and people laughed and nobody noticed me, standing there with a piece of paper in my hand that told me exactly where I stood in her life with the staff behind swinging doors hidden. That is when I realized this was not an accident. This was not stress. This was not a joke. This was intentional. She wanted me out of sight. I walked into the kitchen and the staff looked at me, confused. One of them even asked if I was lost. I wanted to disappear. I sat at a small table with servers, people who had no idea who I was, and I listened to the sounds of the celebration on the other side of the wall. Laughter, clinking glasses, speeches. My sister did not mention me once, not in her speech, not in her thanks, not anywhere. I could feel years of memories playing in my head like a messed up montage. Me lending her money, me defending her when people talked trash, me putting her needs before my own, over and over, and there I was, eating cold food alone. That is when the sadness turned into something else, clarity. I stopped crying because I had cried enough for this girl, for this family, for this role I had played for years. I pulled out my phone. I did not text anyone. I did not call a friend to vent. I made one call, a call. I never thought I would make a call. Lily never thought I was capable of making because she never really knew me. She only knew the version of me that stayed quiet, and that was about to change. The kitchen noise faded out as the phone rang and my heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something else, resolve. Because in that moment, sitting with staff at my own sister's wedding, I realized something powerful: people only treat you the way you allow them to, and I was done. Allowing it, done, being invisible, done being used, done being grateful for scraps. The call connected, and everything that followed started right there behind those swinging doors. While the party went on, unaware that the story they thought they were telling was about to flip, and this was only the beginning. The voice on the other end of the call was calm, almost bored, like this was just another normal day for him. And that contrast made my hands shake even more. He said my name once, Emma, and asked if I was sure, because once this started there was no pretending it was a misunderstanding. I told him I was sitting in the kitchen at my sister's wedding, and there was a pause, not a long one but long enough for me to know he understood everything without me explaining more. He said okay, and told me he would take care of it. But before he hung up, he asked one question that stuck with me. Are you finally done being quiet? I said yes without hesitation. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something I had not felt in years: control. But control does not mean peace, not right away at least, because the memories kept flooding back, like my mind needed to justify why I was doing this. I remembered being 16 when Lily crashed my car and cried like the world was ending, and I took the blame even though it was not my fault. I remembered working 2 jobs while she chased dreams, and when she failed, she slept on my couch and I paid rent alone. I remembered how she borrowed money, said it was just temporary, and never paid it back. Not even once. And I remembered how every time I tried to speak up, someone would say, that is just how Lily is. Like that was an excuse sitting there. I realized how many times I had been told to be the bigger person, and how being the bigger person always meant being smaller. After dinner plates were cleared, one of the servers asked if I wanted dessert, and I said no. My stomach was too tight. I could hear speeches now muffled through the wall. Applause, laughter, someone cheering, and I wondered if anyone had noticed I was gone. Part of me hoped someone would ask where I was. Not because I wanted attention, but because I wanted proof that I mattered. No one came. Time moved weird in that kitchen. Minutes felt like hours. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Lily. Where are you? No apology, no concern, just annoyance. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I am where you put me. There were dots like she was typing, then nothing. A few minutes later, another message. Can you come out for pictures? People are asking. People are asking, not her people. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest. I typed back. I am busy. Busy doing what? She replied almost instantly, living with your choice. That message stayed unread. The wedding wrapped up without me. When I finally walked out, the venue was quieter, guests leaving, staff cleaning up. Lily avoided me completely, like I was a problem she hoped would disappear if ignored. I did not say goodbye. I drove home alone that night. I did not cry. I sat on my bed staring at the wall, replaying everything. But instead of sadness, there was a strange calm. The next morning my phone exploded. Calls, texts, messages from family. Why did you leave early? Lily is upset. You embarrassed her. You should have been supportive. Supportive. I did not answer because for the first time I was not interested in explaining myself. 2 days later, Lily called me directly. I answered. She did not say hi, she went straight into it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I let her talk. She always talked herself into revealing things when she thought she was in control. She said people noticed my absence. She said it made her look bad. She said I ruined her day. I asked her one question. "Did you ever think about how I would feel?" She laughed and said, "Emma, do not make this about you." That laugh sealed it. I hung up, and that is when the second phase began. Because revenge does not always look loud or messy. Sometimes it is quiet, calculated, and slow. The man I called worked with numbers, contracts, timelines, things Lily never paid attention to because she thought details were beneath her. What Lily never knew was that a big part of her wedding was built on money that was not actually hers. The venue deposit, the catering advance, the decorations, a lot of it came from a loan. Agreement she signed with me years ago when she was desperate. An agreement she never expected me to enforce because she thought I was weak. 3 days after the wedding, Lily received an email, a formal one, about repayment, about timelines, about consequences. She called me immediately screaming, asking if this was a joke. I told her calmly that jokes were supposed to be funny. She said I was heartless. She said I was betraying family. She said I was doing this out of spite. I told her I was doing it out of self-respect. She threatened to tell everyone. I told her she could, because for once I was not scared of the story getting out. What she did not realize was that people already knew more than she thought during the wedding. Several guests noticed my absence and started asking questions. Stories never stay quiet at events like that. And when people asked me later, I told the truth. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. I said I was seated with staff because my sister thought I did not fit the vibe. That sentence did more damage than any insult ever could, because it was simple and real. Some people stopped defending her, some went quiet, some looked uncomfortable. That silence was louder than support. Lily started spiraling. She texted me late at night, long messages flipping between anger, guilt, and denial. 1 minute she accused me of ruining her marriage. The next she begged me to let it go. I did not respond because the quiet that once hurt me was now my power. Then came the call from her husband. He asked if we could talk. I said yes. He sounded tired, confused, like someone realizing too late what they married into. He asked me if what he heard was true. I told him everything calmly about the seating, about the money, about years of patterns. There was a long silence. Then he said, "I wish I knew this before." That was the moment I understood my revenge was not about hurting Lily. It was about finally telling the truth. And the truth does not need shouting, it just needs space to be heard from that point. On everything started to crack slowly, quietly, like ice under pressure. And Lily still had no idea how deep it would go, because the real consequences were just beginning. And for the first time in my life, I was not running from what came next. I was ready. The silence after that call with her husband felt heavy but clean, like finally exhaling. After holding my breath for years, I did not celebrate, I did not smile, I just felt steady. Lily, on the other hand, unraveled fast. She started showing up everywhere. I was not physically at my door, but digitally blowing up my phone. Emails, voicemails, even messages through mutual friends. Like she was trying to corner me into reacting. She kept saying, "You are taking this too far. You are punishing me. You are jealous. You always were that last one." Hurt for about 2 seconds. Then I laughed because it was the oldest excuse in the book. When someone refuses to look at themselves, jealous of what exactly? Being humiliated at your own wedding. Being hidden like a stain. Being told you do not fit the vibe. No, what I felt was clarity. A week after the wedding, the repayment deadline passed. Nothing. No transfer, no call, no apology that was expected. So the next step kicked in automatically. Contracts do not care about tears or excuses. They only care about terms. Her bank accounts were flagged, not frozen, not dramatic, just limited enough to make everyday life annoying. Suddenly her cards declined, subscriptions stopped, payments bounced, small things but constant. That is when she really panicked. She showed up at my apartment, unannounced one evening, eyes, red makeup, messy hair pulled back like she had been pacing for hours. She banged on the door like the world was ending. I did not open it right away. I watched through the peephole while she shifted her weight, muttering to herself like she always did when she thought she was alone. When I finally opened the door, she rushed in like she owned the place, like she always had. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped. I closed the door slowly behind her. I enforced an agreement, I said calmly. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You would really do this to me, after everything, that word again." I asked her what everything meant. She opened her mouth and closed it. She could not list one thing she had done for me. Not one. Instead, she went straight for guilt. "You know how stressed I am. You know I just got married. You know this could ruin me." I looked at her and realized something sad. She still thought the world revolved around her feelings. I told her, "Maybe you should have thought about that when you decided I did not deserve a seat." Her face twisted and she said, "You are still on that." Still on that. Like it was a joke, like it was nothing. That is when I finally said the thing I had never said out loud. It was never just the seat, Lily. It was everything before it that shut her up for a moment. Then she laughed bitterly and said, "Wow, you really think you are some victim." Now I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I said, "I do not think I am a victim anymore." And that scared her because she could not manipulate that version of me. She tried one last tactic: tears. She cried hard, dramatic, gasping sobs like we were kids again, and she had broken something and wanted me to fix it. But I stayed still. I told her she needed to leave. She asked if we could talk later. I said, "Maybe when you are ready to talk like equals." She left without another word. The next day my mom called. She started with concern, then moved into disappointment, then guilt, like a well-rehearsed script. She said Lily is hurting. She said family should not do this to each other. She said I was being cruel. I asked her one question: "Did you know where I was seated?" She paused. That pause told me everything. She said, "Lily said it was a misunderstanding." I said, "No, it was a choice." Another pause. Then she said, "You should have said something." I almost laughed. Said something when she told me not to embarrass her, when she laughed in my face. I told my mom I had said enough for a lifetime. After that call, something shifted in the family dynamic. People stopped calling as much, conversations got shorter, careful, like everyone was afraid of saying the wrong thing. But behind the scenes, people were watching, because when someone who has always been quiet finally stops, people get curious. Then something unexpected happened. A cousin reached out privately, then an aunt, then someone I barely talked to. They all said versions of the same thing. "I always thought she treated you badly. I never liked how she spoke to you. I wondered why you put up with it." Those messages hit harder than the humiliation ever did, because it meant I was not crazy. I was not exaggerating. I was not alone. Lily noticed the shift too. She posted online trying to control the narrative. Vague quotes about betrayal and fake people and protecting your peace. People saw through it. Comments were polite but distant, likes dropped. Engagement slowed, her perfect image cracked. Then her husband moved out temporarily. Not dramatic, not loud, just a bag in space. He said he needed time. Time is dangerous when truth starts settling. Lily called me again late one night. Her voice different, softer, tired. She asked me why I hated her. I said I never hated you. I just finally loved myself more. She did not know what to say to that, because people like Lily do not understand self-love unless it serves them. Weeks passed. Payments started coming in small amounts. Partial attempts, like she was hoping effort would replace accountability. It did not. The pressure built slowly, financial, social, emotional. And I stayed quiet, not because I was scared, but because I did not need to say anything anymore. The truth was doing the work for me. Then came the message that told me everything had reached a breaking point. "Can we meet?" She wrote, "Just us." I stared at it for a long time, not because I was afraid, but because I knew this meeting would change whatever was left between us. I agreed. We met in a small cafe, neutral territory. No audience, no family, no leverage. She looked smaller somehow, not physically but energetically. like someone who had lost control of the story. She did not insult me, she did not yell, she apologized. Not a perfect apology, not a movie one, but a real clumsy, broken one. She said she never thought I would stand up to her. She said she did not realize how much she hurt me. She said she thought I would always be there no matter what. That last part mattered most because that was the truth. She thought my loyalty had no limit. I listened, then I told her something she did not expect. I said I am open to rebuilding, but not like before. No more taking, no more disrespect, no more assuming I will clean up your mess. She nodded, but I could tell she did not fully get it. Yet, growth takes time. As we stood to leave, she asked one last question. Why? Now I looked at her and said, because you finally showed me who you are in a room full of people and I believed you. We walked out separately. I do not know if we will ever be close again, but I know this. The quiet revenge was never about destroying her. It was about destroying the version of me that accepted less than I deserved, and once that version was gone, everything else followed. After that cafe meeting, I did not feel relief like people expect. When a big confrontation ends, there was no rush, no victory music, just a calm awareness that something old had finally died. Not my sister, not our relationship, but the illusion that things would magically fix themselves if I just kept being patient. Lily tried for a while after that. She sent check-in messages, asked how I was, shared random updates like we were rebuilding brick by brick, but something was off. The power dynamic had shifted and she felt it. Every message felt careful, measured. Like she was afraid of crossing an invisible line she could no longer pretend did not exist. And that made her uncomfortable. People like Lily thrive on certainty, on knowing how far they can push. And with me, she no longer knew. Family gatherings became strange. Holidays felt tense. Smiles lasted a second too long. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Some people treated me like I was brave, others like I was dangerous. Both labels felt wrong. I was just tired of lying. Then something else started happening. People started asking me for advice quietly, privately. A cousin about a toxic partner, a friend about a manipulative boss, even my mom once about a boundary she did not know how to set. It was ironic. The girl who used to be invisible was now being seen as someone strong, not loud, strong, steady, strong. And that strength came from knowing when to walk away. Lily, on the other hand, struggled. Her marriage did not magically bounce back. Money was still tight and her image never fully recovered. She blamed me. Sometimes I could feel it in the silence, in the way she avoided eye contact, in the clipped tone she used when we spoke. But she could not say it out loud anymore, because saying it would mean admitting she had crossed a line. One evening, she sent me a long message, pages of words about how hard things were, how alone she felt, how she never meant to hurt me, how she wished we could go back. I read it slowly, carefully, and then I typed a response that took me years to learn how to write. I am sorry you are hurting, but I cannot carry this for you anymore. I hit send and put my phone down. My hands did not shake. That was new. Weeks later, I heard through family that she was in therapy. I hope that part is true, not because it makes a better story, but because I want her to heal. Even if we never fully reconnect. Revenge does not have to mean wishing someone pain. Sometimes it means refusing to bleed for them anymore. My life got quieter after all of this. Not empty quiet, but peaceful quiet. I stopped over, explaining, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped showing up where I was not respected, and something funny happened. Opportunities showed up. I took a job offer I would have been too scared to take before I traveled alone for the first time. I met people who listened when I spoke. I realized how much energy I had spent managing other people's emotions, and how free I felt without that weight. One night, months later, I ran into Lily at a family event. We were polite, civil, distant. She looked at me for a long second and said, "You really changed." I smiled and said, "No, I just stopped pretending." That was the last real conversation we had. I do not know what the future holds for us. Maybe distance, maybe a new kind of relationship, maybe none at all. But I know this: being seated with staff at that wedding was humiliating. But it was also the moment my life split into before and after. Before, I was the girl who stayed quiet to keep peace. After, I was the woman who chose herself even when it made others uncomfortable. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of my story, know this. You do not need a dramatic revenge. You do not need to scream or destroy. You just need to stop accepting what hurts you. Because sometimes the quietest response changes everything, and sometimes being pushed aside is the exact push you needed to finally stand up. And that lesson was worth more than any seat at any table. The strange thing about choosing yourself is that nobody prepares you for the silence that comes after, not the peaceful kind, the awkward echoing kind, where you realize how much noise other people brought into your life. After everything, with Lily slowed down, I had too much space to think, and at first that scared me, because when you stop reacting, you start remembering. I remembered moments I brushed off for years, like how she used to borrow my clothes and never return them, how she would introduce me as her boring sister, how she would cancel plans last minute and expect me to understand. At the time, I told myself those were small things. They were not. They were patterns. And patterns only look small when you are standing inside. Then with the distance came anger. Not loud, explosive anger, but that slow, simmering kind, the kind that makes you replay conversations in the shower and think, wow, I should have said something. I let myself feel it for the first time. Instead of swallowing it, I did not text her. I did not confront anyone. I just let it exist. That was uncomfortable but necessary. One night, I sat alone on my couch scrolling through old photos, and I stopped on a picture of me and Lily from years ago. We were younger, smiling, arms around each other. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out when exactly things shifted, and that is when it hit me. It was never one big moment. It was death by 1,000 small cuts, and the wedding was just the moment I finally bled, where everyone could see it. Once I accepted that, the guilt started creeping in, not guilt for what I did, but guilt for not fixing it, like I always had. I kept thinking, maybe I should have explained better. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have just let it go. That voice sounded a lot like my mom's, and I realized how deeply that programming ran. Women in my family were taught to smooth things over, to absorb discomfort, to keep everyone comfortable, even if it meant erasing themselves. Breaking that cycle felt like betrayal to them, but to me it felt like survival. Then came the second wave. Fear of being alone, fear of being labeled difficult, fear that maybe I really was cold-hearted. Because when you stop playing a role, people miss the role, not the person. I watched how some relationships faded quietly once I stopped being useful. No more last-minute favors, no more emotional dumping, no more yes without thinking. And people noticed. Some drifted, some disappeared. Some got angry. That hurt more than I expected, because part of me wondered if anyone ever loved me, or just what I provided. It took time to understand that this was not a loss, it was clarity. The ones who stayed did not need me to shrink. They met me where I was slowly. I started building a different life, a smaller one, but a real one. Mornings without rushing, evenings without dread, weekends that belonged to me. I learned what I liked without adjusting it for anyone else. What music I actually enjoyed, what food I craved, what kind of silence felt good. I started saying no out loud, and every time I did, it felt like jumping off a cliff and landing safely. Nothing bad happened. The world did not end. The people who mattered adjusted. The ones who did not fell away. Lily still hovered at the edges of my life, liking posts, sending short messages, asking neutral questions. She was testing the water, and I kept my responses kind but firm. I was not punishing her. I was protecting myself. There is a difference. One afternoon she asked if we could grab coffee, just coffee. My chest tightened. Old me would have said yes immediately, hoping it meant things were going back to normal. New me asked a question first, why. There was a long pause before she replied, I just miss you. That honesty caught me off guard. So I agreed. We met at a quiet place. Neither of us had memories attached to. She looked nervous, fidgety, like she was trying to read my face. We talked about safe things, work, weather, mutual relatives. Then she finally said, I know I hurt you. I waited. She added, I did. not realize how much until you stopped fixing everything. That was the closest she had come to accountability. I told her I needed consistency, not words. She nodded like she understood, but I could see how hard that was for her because consistency requires humility. We left without hugging, and that was okay. Healing does not have to look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like space with honesty after that meeting. Something in me settled. I no longer felt the need for a dramatic ending or full closure. Some stories do not end clean, they just quiet down. I stopped checking my phone, waiting for messages. I stopped wondering what people were saying behind my back because my life was finally happening in front of me. I slept better, laughed easier, stood taller. The revenge everyone expects in stories is loud, public, messy. Mine was invisible. It was choosing myself in 1,000 small moments, and that kind of revenge lasts. If you are still listening and you feel torn between keeping peace and keeping yourself, hear this peace that costs you. Your dignity is not peace. Love that requires silence is not love, and boundaries are not punishment, they are instructions. The day my sister seated me with staff, she thought she was hiding me. She had no idea she was setting me free, and freedom. Freedom changes you in ways apologies never could. Freedom sounds big when people talk about it, but living it day after day is quieter than I expected. It shows up in small, ordinary moments, like waking up without that tight feeling in your chest, or choosing what to do with your time, without running it past anyone. After everything slowed down, I started noticing how much my body had been holding on to. I had lived for so long in reaction mode, that stillness felt unnatural. At first I would catch myself checking my phone for drama that never came, replaying conversations that no longer mattered, bracing for criticism that never arrived. Healing is strange, like that your nervous system needs time to learn that the danger is gone. I started therapy not because someone pushed me, but because I finally had the space to ask why I let things go on for so long. The answer was uncomfortable. I had confused endurance with love, self-sacrifice with kindness, silence with strength, unlearning that felt like pulling weeds out by the root, slow, messy, but necessary. In those sessions, I talked about Lily more honestly than I ever had. I admitted how much I admired her and how much I resented her at the same time, how I felt invisible next to her, and how I chased her approval. Like it was oxygen. Saying those things out loud made them lose their power. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You were loyal to someone who was not loyal to you, but that does not make you foolish, it makes you human. That sentence lifted a weight I did not know I was carrying outside of therapy. My life kept expanding. I made new friends, the kind who asked questions and waited for answers. I dated slowly, cautiously, learning what respect felt like in real time. I took risks that scared me, but did not diminish me. And through all of it, I kept my distance from Lily. Not cold distance, just clear distance. She would reach out occasionally, sharing updates about therapy or work or her marriage, trying to show growth, and I acknowledged it without rewarding it because growth is something you sustain, not something you perform. Family members still tested me. They would say things like, "She is really trying. You should meet her halfway. Life is too short," and I learned how to respond without defending myself. I would say, "I am open to change, but I am not going back." Most people did not know what to do with that. Then came the holiday dinner that almost pulled me back into old habits. The table was full, familiar laughter, old jokes I had heard my whole life. Lily sat across from me, carefully polite, smiling. At one point, she made a joke at my expense. Nothing cruel, just subtle, the kind that would have slid by unnoticed before. And I felt that old instinct rise, the urge to laugh it off, to keep things light. Instead, I met her eyes and said, "Hey, do not do that." The room went quiet. She blinked, surprised, then nodded and said, "Sorry." And just like that, the moment passed, no explosion, no drama. Later that night, my aunt pulled me aside and whispered, "I am proud of you." That meant more than any apology Lily could give, because it meant someone saw the work as time went on. Lily changed in small ways. She listened more, talked less, apologized faster. But I also noticed how hard it was for her to sit without being the center. Sometimes she would slip into old patterns, and I would step back, and she would feel it. That is how boundaries work. They teach people how to treat you. I stopped waiting for a final apology or a grand gesture. I realized I did not need it. Closure came from knowing I would never allow myself to be reduced again. The wedding memory still stings, sometimes not like a wound but like a scar you notice when the weather changes, but scars remind you that you survived. If that day had not happened, if I had been seated at the main table, smiling, pretending everything was fine, I might still be living half a life. That thought humbles me. Sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that wake you up. I do not tell this story to shame my sister or paint myself as perfect. I tell it because there are so many people living quietly in the background of their own lives, waiting for permission to step forward. You do not need permission. You do not need a dramatic breaking point. You just need to listen to the moment when your body says enough. Mine happened in a kitchen behind swinging doors while music played without me, and I am grateful it did. Because it taught me that self-respect is not loud, it is consistent, and once you choose it, everything else starts to fall into place. There was a point months later when I stopped thinking about the wedding every day, and that is how I knew I was really healing. Not because it no longer mattered, but because it no longer controlled me. Healing is not forgetting, it is remembering without flinching. I started noticing how different my reactions were in situations that used to drain me. When someone interrupted me, I spoke up. When someone crossed a line, I addressed it. When someone expected too much, I said no without explaining my childhood trauma that was new. Before I would rehearse conversations in my head for hours, trying to sound calm, kind, reasonable. Now I trusted myself to respond in the moment, and most of the time that was enough. Lily noticed the difference too. She stopped trying to test me, stopped pushing buttons because there was nothing to push anymore. Our interactions became surface-level updates, birthdays, polite check-ins, and honestly, that was okay. Distance does not always mean failure, sometimes it means safety. One afternoon I ran into someone from the wedding, someone I barely knew. She hesitated before speaking, then said, "I hope this is not awkward, but I wanted to tell you something." She told me she remembered asking where I was that night and how uncomfortable it felt when no one had an answer. She said it changed the way she saw Lily, not because of gossip, but because of silence that stayed with me. People notice more than we think. They may not speak up, but they see patterns. Truth does not need a microphone. It shows up. Eventually, there were days I still felt sad for the relationship we could have had, for the version of sisters we might have been. If things were different, I let myself grieve that without blaming myself. You can love someone and still accept that they cannot meet you where you are. That acceptance is a form of peace. I learned to stop romanticizing suffering. I used to think loyalty meant staying no matter what, that love meant endurance, that strength meant silence. Now I know loyalty without respect is self-abandonment. Love without safety is fear, and silence without choice is oppression. That shift changed everything. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was, stopped asking if I was too much, stopped shrinking to fit rooms that did not want to make space. I started showing up fully, and some people did not like that. That was okay, because the ones who stayed loved me louder than I had ever been loved before. Not because I bent, but because I stood. Lily still has work to do. So do I. Healing is not a competition, but we are no longer moving on the same timeline, and I am done waiting for anyone to catch up. Sometimes I think about that kitchen table, the cold food, the noise on the other side of the wall, and instead of shame, I feel gratitude, because that was the moment I stopped asking for a seat and started building my own table. And if you are listening and you feel like you are always the extra chair, the afterthought, the one placed out of sight, hear this. You do not need to earn your place. You already belong. The moment you decide to stop hiding is the moment your life begins. There is a strange grief that comes with growth that nobody warns you about. It is not loud or dramatic, It is quiet and private, and it shows up when you realize you cannot go back, even if you wanted to. After months of distance and change, I understood something clearly. The version of me who tolerated that kind of treatment no longer existed, and trying to reach her felt like trying to visit a house that had already been torn down. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because betrayal is an event, but growth is a separation. You separate from people, from roles, from expectations that once defined you, and not everyone survives that separation. I felt it the most during moments that were supposed to be happy birthdays, holidays, random wins when you normally turn to family. First, there were times I picked up my phone wanting to share something with Lily, and then remembered that closeness was no longer safe. That pause hurt, but it also protected me. People talk about boundaries like they are walls, but they are really filters. They let the right things through and block the rest. Once I stopped explaining myself, I noticed how differently people treated me. Some respected me more, some avoided me, some resented me. Those reactions said more about them than me. I also noticed how much emotional labor I had been doing without realizing it. Smoothing conversations, managing moods, anticipating reactions, without that burden. I had energy for myself. For the first time, I started journaling, something I had always mocked before, and I found pages filled with anger, sadness, relief, pride, all mixed together. I wrote letters I never sent. I forgave myself for staying so long. I forgave myself for leaving, because both required strength at different times. Lily reached out less frequently now. But when she did, there was a new tone, not entitled, not demanding, just cautious. Once she admitted something that surprised me. She said losing control over me forced her to look at herself. I did not respond right away, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I did not want to rush into hope. Hope without evidence had hurt me before. Eventually I replied, "I hope you keep looking." That was all, and that was enough. Our parents tried to play mediator more than once, inviting both of us to dinners, asking us to talk it out. I declined politely, not because I was bitter, but because I knew forced conversations only reopen wounds. Healing needs consent. One night I dreamed about the wedding, not the humiliation, but the moment I stood up from that kitchen table and walked out in the dream. The doors were heavy and loud, and everyone turned to look at me when I woke up. My heart was racing. It took me a second to realize something important. I was no longer dreaming about being small. I was dreaming about leaving. That felt like progress. As time passed, I became someone younger, me would have admired, not flashy, not fearless, but grounded. I trusted my instincts. I protected my peace. I stopped bargaining with people who did not see my worth, and slowly joy returned, real joy, not relief disguised as happiness. I laughed without scanning the room. I spoke without rehearsing. I rested without guilt. Those were the real wins. I do not know if Lily and I will ever be close again, and I am finally okay with that, because closeness without respect is just proximity, and family without kindness is just shared history. If there is one thing this whole experience taught me, it is this: being chosen by others feels good, but choosing yourself changes your life. The quiet revenge was not the contracts or the consequences, it was the way I stopped betraying myself. And if you are listening and feel like you are stuck in a role that costs you your peace, know that you are allowed to rewrite the script. You do not owe anyone access to you just because they are used to it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door, because walking away means you trust yourself enough to know where you are going. There was a moment sometime after all the noise had faded, when I realized I was no longer telling myself the story the way I used to. Before I would say my sister hurt me, and I stayed. Now I said my sister hurt me, and I chose myself. That shift mattered more than anything that happened after, because stories shape how we heal. I started paying attention to how often people around me minimized their own pain the way I once did, saying things like it was not that bad, or they did not mean it, or I am probably overreacting. Those sentences used to live in my mouth. Now I heard them from the outside, and they sounded different. They sounded like fear, fear of being alone, fear of conflict, fear of being labeled difficult, and I understood them deeply. Because choosing yourself is lonely at first. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer available for the roles people assigned you. I remember one night sitting on my balcony city, quiet below, lights flickering like stars, and I thought about how many versions of me had existed over the years. The daughter who kept peace, the sister who fixed everything, the friend who always showed up, the woman who swallowed disappointment, and I thanked them. That might sound strange, but I meant it. Those versions kept me safe when I did not know how to protect myself, but I no longer needed them. Letting them go felt like shedding a skin, slow, uncomfortable, but necessary. Lily still appeared in my thoughts more often than I wanted, not because I missed her exactly, but because unresolved relationships linger. Sometimes I imagined what I would say if she truly listened. Sometimes I imagined her finally understanding. Sometimes I imagined nothing at all. And that last one scared me at first, because indifference feels like loss. But then I realized indifference is peace. When attachment was pain, our family dynamic continued to shift quietly. There were fewer group messages, fewer forced gatherings, fewer fake smiles. Some people blamed me for that. They said things like everything used to be fine, fine for who, fine because I was silent, fine because I absorbed discomfort, fine because I did not disrupt the pattern. Fine was never fine. I stopped trying to correct anyone. People protect the version of the story that keeps them comfortable. I let them. There is power in not defending yourself. Power in letting the truth stand without decoration. I noticed how much time I suddenly had. Time I used to spend worrying, explaining, anticipating. Now it was empty, and emptiness can be terrifying if you are not used to it. So I filled it intentionally with long walks, with books I had never allowed myself to read because they did not seem productive, with mornings where I stayed in bed and listened to my own thoughts. I learned to sit with myself. That was harder than any confrontation, because when you remove distractions, you meet the parts of you that were ignored, the anger, the sadness, the grief. I let them speak. I cried for the younger me who believed love had to hurt. I grieved the sisterhood I never truly had. I mourned the years I spent shrinking. Grief is not weakness, it is honesty, and honesty is where healing actually begins. There were days I missed the chaos that surprised me because chaos had been familiar. Peace felt foreign. I would catch myself almost creating problems just to feel normal again. Then I would stop and breathe and choose calm. That choice got easier. With time, people began to notice the difference in me. They said things like, "You seem lighter, you seem grounded, you seem different," and I would smile because I was, but not in a way that needed validation. Lily sent me a message one evening that felt different. It was not defensive or apologetic or manipulative. It was simple. I am learning to sit with things instead of running from them. I read it twice. Part of me wanted to respond with warmth. Part of me wanted to stay silent. I chose honesty. I said, "I hope you keep doing that. It changed my life." She replied with a heart, "Nothing more." And that was enough. Not because it fixed us, but because it showed movement. Growth does not guarantee reconciliation. Sometimes it only guarantees understanding, and understanding does not always bring people closer. Sometimes it brings clarity about distance. I accepted that. I stopped fantasizing about a perfect future version of us. I focused on the present version of me, the woman who no longer begged for respect, the woman who noticed red flags early, the woman who trusted her discomfort. That trust became my anchor. I used it in work, in friendships, in love when something felt off. I listened. I no longer waited for proof that would justify my feelings. My feelings were proof that alone changed everything. I thought often about the wedding still, but not as a wound, as a turning point. That day exposed something I could not unsee, and once you see clearly, you cannot pretend anymore. I realized how many people live their entire lives seated in metaphorical kitchens, out of sight, out of mind, grateful for crumbs because they were taught that wanting more was selfish. It is not wanting. Respect is not selfish. Wanting kindness is not dramatic. Wanting to be seen is not asking too much. It is asking the right people. I wish I could say that after everything I felt triumphant, but the truth is deeper. I felt free. Free from explaining, free from performing, free from roles that hurt. Freedom does not shout, it settles. It shows up in how you breathe, how you rest, how you choose. One afternoon months later, I hosted a small dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, candles, soft music, food I loved. Friends sat around my table laughing, talking, interrupting each other kindly, and I looked around and felt something warm and solid belonging. Not because I was needed, not because I was useful, but because I was wanted. That moment healed. Something in me I did not know was still broken. I thought about Lily. I hoped she would find that feeling too, but I no longer felt responsible for making sure she did. That was her journey. Mine was here. If you are listening and wondering whether choosing yourself is worth the cost, let me tell you this. It costs you people who only loved your silence. It costs you comfort that was built on denial. It costs you roles that never fit. But what you gain is your life, your voice, your peace. And once you taste that, you never want to go back. The quiet revenge was never revenge at all. It was awakening. An awakening is irreversible. There is a moment that comes after awakening where you realize you are responsible for what happens next. And that responsibility can feel heavier than the pain you escaped, because when you were stuck, at least you knew the rules. Be quiet, be helpful. Do not rock the boat. Now there were no rules, just choices. And choices mean accountability. I remember the first time I disappointed someone new. After all this growth, I said no to a request that would have drained me and watched their face fall. Old me would have panicked, apologized over, explained. New me sat with the discomfort, and something incredible happened. They respected it. That moment rewired something in my brain. I realized how many people had never actually asked too much of me. I just gave too much without being asked. Boundaries did not make me less kind. They made my kindness real. I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. That distinction matters. Lily faded further into the background of my daily life, not out of anger, but out of alignment. Our paths no longer crossed naturally, and I stopped forcing intersections. When we did speak, it was neutral, almost distant, like two people who shared history but not direction. I grieved that quietly, not because I wanted the old version back, but because letting go of what you hoped someone could be still hurts. Hope is heavy. There were days I wanted to reach out to her just to feel familiar again, and then I remembered familiarity was the trap. Growth does not feel familiar at first. It feels lonely, awkward, unfinished. But then one day it feels like home. I started noticing how often I checked in with myself. Am I tired? Am I uncomfortable? Am I shrinking? Those questions became my compass. And when the answer was yes, I listened. I walked away from rooms that felt wrong, from conversations that dismissed me, from expectations that assumed my silence. Each time I did that, I felt a little stronger, not louder, stronger. People started treating me differently, some carefully, some kindly, some with distance. All of it was information. I learned to read behavior instead of words. Lily once told me during a rare, honest moment that she felt like she lost me. And for the first time, I did not rush to reassure her. I said, "You did not lose me. You just do not have access to the version of me who accepted being hurt." She was quiet after that, because people who benefited from your self-neglect struggle when it ends. That is not cruelty. That is consequence. I spent a long time thinking about forgiveness, whether I had forgiven her, whether I needed to, and I realized forgiveness is not something you owe anyone. It is something you give yourself. I forgave myself for staying, for hoping, for ignoring red flags, and in doing that, I released the need for her to change. If she did, that was her work. My work was done. The wedding memory softened even more. It became symbolic rather than painful, a doorway rather than a wound. That kitchen table was not my lowest point. It was my turning point. I stopped seeing it as humiliation. I saw it as clarity. Sometimes life does not shout when it wants you to change. Sometimes it seats you somewhere you do not belong until you finally stand up. If I could speak to the woman I was that day, I would not tell her to be patient or calm. I would tell her to trust the anger. Anger is not the enemy. Unexpressed anger is that anger saved me. It showed me where my boundaries had been crossed. It pointed me toward myself. I am not perfect now. I still hesitate sometimes. I still feel the urge to smooth things over, but now I catch it and I choose differently. That is growth, quiet, steady, earned. If you are listening and you are afraid of what will happen, if you stop being the fixer, the peacemaker, the invisible one, let me tell you what happens. Some people will leave, some will get angry, some will not understand, and then you will breathe, you will sleep. You will laugh, you will recognize yourself again. That is the trade, and it is worth it. There is a phase of healing. People rarely talk about the part where nothing dramatic is happening, but everything inside you is rearranging. It feels almost boring compared to the chaos you survived, and that can make you doubt whether you are actually moving forward. I remember waking up one morning months later, sunlight coming through the window, coffee brewing in the kitchen, and realizing my mind was quiet. No replaying conversations, no bracing for conflict, no planning emotional exits, just quiet. And instead of relief, I felt uneasy because peace was unfamiliar. When you live in survival mode long enough, calm can feel like something is wrong. I had to learn how to trust stillness, to believe that nothing happening did not mean something bad was coming. That took time. During that time, I started noticing my patterns more clearly, how I still apologized automatically, how I softened my opinions to sound nicer, how I waited for permission to take up space. Old habits do not disappear overnight, they fade slowly if you let them. I practiced pausing before responding, before agreeing, before explaining. Sometimes that pause was just a breath. Sometimes it was a full day, and each time I chose myself, even in small ways, I felt more grounded. Lily reached out once during this phase. Not with drama, not with guilt, but with curiosity. She asked how I seemed so calm. That question surprised me because calm had never been my thing. I told her the truth. I stopped fighting myself. She did not respond right away later. She said she did not know how to do that. I believed her because people who have always been loud rarely know how to sit with silence. I did not try to teach her. This was not my lesson to pass on. I focused on building a life that felt honest. I changed routines, changed how I spoke to myself, changed what I tolerated. I stopped calling things misunderstandings when they were patterns, stopped calling people blunt when they were cruel. Stopped calling myself sensitive when I was just aware. Language matters. How you name your experience shapes how you carry it. I named what happened to me. Clearly I was disrespected. I was dismissed. I was minimized, and I responded by choosing myself. That clarity removed the shame. Shame thrives in confusion. Once I was clear, shame had nothing to feed on. There were moments I missed. Being needed. Being needed feels like purpose when you do not know yourself yet, but I reminded myself that being needed is not the same as being valued. I wanted to be chosen, not relied on, and that distinction reshaped my relationships. I started attracting different people, people who asked how I felt and waited for the answer, people who did not joke at my expense, people who noticed when I pulled back. It felt strange at first, like I had stepped into the wrong room, then it felt right. Family dynamics continued to adjust. Some relatives never fully understood my choices. They still hinted that things could go back to how they were. I smiled politely and changed the subject, because going back was not an option. You cannot unknow what you know. I realized how often families confuse harmony with avoidance, how silence is mistaken for peace, and how the person who finally speaks up becomes the problem. I accepted that role without absorbing the blame. Someone has to disrupt the pattern. That someone happened to be me. Lily struggled during this time, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, unsettled way. She was learning who she was without controlling the narrative. That is hard for anyone. I felt compassion for her. But compassion does not mean access. I kept my distance steady. Sometimes she tried to slip into old habits, subtle comments, little jokes, and I would respond calmly, naming it. She would stop. That alone told me everything she knew. One night she asked me something that caught me off guard. She asked if I thought we would ever be close again. I took a long time to answer because honesty mattered more than comfort. I said maybe, but only if close does not mean me disappearing. She nodded slowly. That was the first time I saw real understanding in her eyes. Not regret, not fear, but awareness. Awareness changes people, but it also comes too late. Sometimes I made peace with whatever outcome awaited us, closeness, distance, something in between. None of it defined my worth anymore. I began to see how my story connected to so many others. Friends confided in me about siblings who drained them, parents who expected silence, partners who crossed lines, and I did not give advice. I just listened and told them what I learned. Pay attention to how you feel after interacting with someone. Notice who leaves you tired. Notice who leaves you lighter. Your body knows before your mind admits it. Those conversations reminded me why this experience mattered. It was not just about me. It was about breaking cycles. Cycles of silence, of obligation, of emotional labor passed down quietly. Breaking a cycle rarely feels heroic. It feels lonely. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like being misunderstood, but it changes everything. That comes after I started thinking about the future differently, not in terms of plans, but in terms of standards, how I wanted to feel in relationships, what I wanted my days to sound like, who I wanted, access to my energy. Those standards became non-negotiable, and once I honored them, life aligned in ways I could not have forced. Work felt easier, relationships felt safer. My body felt calmer. That calm became my new baseline, and I protected it fiercely. There were days I almost forgot the wedding entirely. Then something small would remind me, a song, a smell, a phrase, and instead of pain, I felt gratitude, because that day gave me my life back. If that humiliation had not happened, I might still be negotiating my worth in silence. Sometimes the universe does not nudge you. It pushes hard, and you either break or wake up. I woke up and I stayed awake. If you are listening and you feel stuck in the middle of change where nothing is exploding, but nothing feels settled, either, trust this part. This is where the real work happens, not in the confrontation, not in the fallout, but in the quiet rebuilding of yourself. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary. Choice by choice. You are not lost, you are becoming. There comes a time after the dust settles, when you realize you are no longer reacting to the past, you are responding to the present, and that difference is subtle but powerful. I noticed it the first time I was invited somewhere, and my instinct was not to ask who else would be there, or how long I had to stay, or what version of myself I needed to bring. I just asked myself, do I want to go? That question used to feel selfish, now it felt honest. Honesty simplified everything. I stopped explaining my boundaries in paragraphs, stopped justifying my needs with stories, stopped apologizing for pauses, and the people who remained adjusted. They did not ask for the old me back. They did not pressure me to soften. They met me where I stood. That felt new and steady. Lily became more distant during this time, not because of conflict, but because I no longer fit into her life the way I used to, and that was hard for her. She once admitted she missed how easy things were between us. I told her gently, easy for you was expensive for me. She went quiet. Sometimes truth does that. It is not meant to hurt, but it does cut through illusion. I could see her trying to redefine herself too. Separate from being admired, separate from being in control. That process is messy. I felt compassion without responsibility. That balance took practice for a long time. I believed caring meant carrying other people's weight. Now I knew better. You can care and still let go. As I built a life rooted in intention, I noticed how different my energy felt. I laughed more freely. I rested without guilt. I spoke without rehearsing. And when conflict did arise, I handled it directly, calmly, without the emotional spiral that once followed. That was growth. Not perfection, just progress. I learned that self-respect is built in moments. No one applauds in the choice to leave early, in the refusal to over-explain, in the pause before saying yes. Those moments add up. Family gatherings became easier, Not because everything was fixed, but because I was no longer pretending. If something felt off, I named it. If someone crossed a line, I addressed it. If I needed space, I took it, and the world did not fall apart. That realization healed something deep. I thought about how many years I had lived believing that my comfort was optional. It was never optional. It was essential. Lily and I existed now in a new reality. Not enemies, not close, just honest. There was no pretending, no hierarchy. Just two adults navigating the consequences of who they had been. Sometimes that meant silence. Sometimes that meant brief kindness. Both were acceptable. I no longer needed our relationship to look a certain way to feel whole. Wholeness came from within. There were nights I reflected on the woman. I used to be the one who sat quietly in that kitchen trying to disappear, and instead of shame, I felt tenderness. She did the best she could with what she knew, and when she learned better, she did better. That is all any of us can do. If you are listening and wondering when it stops hurting, let me tell you something honest. It does not disappear all at once. It fades as your life fills with things that feel right. Hurt shrinks. When joy grows, you do not heal by erasing the past, you heal by outgrowing it. The day I stopped needing validation from the people who hurt me was the day I felt free. And freedom does not mean your life becomes perfect. It means it becomes yours. That is the real ending. Not applause, not revenge, not reconciliation. Ownership of your time, your energy, your worth. And once you claim that no one can seat you anywhere, you do not belong. There is a quiet confidence that settles in once you stop needing people to understand your choices, and I did not even notice it at first. It showed up in how I walked into rooms, how I held eye contact, how I stopped filling silence just to make others comfortable. That confidence was not loud. It did not announce itself, it simply existed. I realized I no longer scanned faces for approval or tension. I listened to what was being said and trusted myself to respond honestly. That trust was new before I had outsourced it to everyone else. If they were happy, I was okay. If they were upset, I felt guilty. Now I let emotions belong to the people who owned them. That shift changed everything. Lily felt it too. During one of our rare conversations, she said, "You do not need me anymore." She said it softly, not accusingly, and I answered just as softly, "I never needed you. I just thought I did that." Truth hung between us. Heavy but clean people confuse need with love all the time. Need is attachment. Love is choice. For the first time, our relationship was based on choice, limited, cautious, but real. There were moments I felt proud of her growth, moments I felt sad for what we lost, moments I felt nothing at all. All of it was allowed. Healing does not demand consistency, it allows complexity. I noticed how my inner voice had changed. It used to criticize, second guess, minimize. Now it asked questions, offered compassion, reminded me to rest. I spoke to myself the way I wished others had. That alone changed my life. Work became a place of expression instead of performance. Friendships became mutual instead of transactional. Love became safe instead of anxious. I stopped chasing intensity and started choosing stability, and stability felt like breathing without effort. Sometimes I wondered who I would have been if the wedding never happened. That thought no longer haunted me, because the woman I became was shaped by the moment I chose myself. Pain does not define you, your response to it does. I learned that being underestimated is not a curse. It is freedom. No one sees your move coming. No one expects you to walk away. No one prepares for your silence, and silence can be powerful when it is chosen. The kitchen memory no longer carried shame, it carried resolve. It reminded me of the exact second my life turned, not when I cried, not when I confronted, but when I decided I will not stay where I am not valued. That decision keeps paying dividends. Even now, if you are listening and you feel like you are waiting for the right moment to choose yourself, let me tell you something. The moment never arrives wrapped in certainty. It arrives in discomfort, in anger, in that quiet voice that says, "This is not okay." Listen to that voice. It is not trying to ruin your life, it is trying to give it back. Some people will never understand your boundaries, some will resent them, some will disappear, and some will finally see you clearly. Those are your people. You do not owe access to anyone who benefits from your silence. You owe honesty to yourself. That is where peace begins. There is a phase near the end of a long emotional journey where you stop asking what happened and start asking who you are now, and that question is quieter, but much harder to answer. I found myself standing in that space, often not lost, not confused, just reflective, like someone looking at a road they have already walked, realizing how far they have come. The anger that once fueled me had softened, not disappeared, but transformed into discernment. Anger showed me where I had been crossed. Discernment showed me where I would no longer go. That difference mattered. I no longer needed the story to keep unfolding dramatically. I was done proving my pain was real. I trusted it. That trust freed up so much energy that I almost did not know what to do with it. At first, I had spent years reacting to other people's needs, anticipating moods, preparing defenses. Now I woke up with nothing pulling at me, and that emptiness felt both peaceful and unsettling. So I filled it intentionally with learning, with rest, with curiosity. I took classes just because I wanted to. I explored places alone without narrating the experience for anyone else. I let days pass without measuring their worth by productivity. I learned that rest is not laziness, it is repair. Repairing the parts of me that had been worn down by years of emotional overextension. Lily remained a distant presence during this time, not absent, but no longer central. We exchanged polite messages on birthdays and holidays. There was no tension, no warmth, just acknowledgement, and that neutrality was its own kind of healing. It meant I was no longer hoping for her to become someone different. I accepted who she was. Acceptance does not mean approval, it means clarity. I noticed how often people tried to pull me back into old roles. They would say things like, "You are so good at handling this, you always know what to say, can you help me fix this?" And sometimes I did, but only when it felt aligned, not out of obligation. Saying no still felt strange sometimes, but no longer felt wrong. I learned that people adjust faster than you expect. When you stop negotiating your boundaries, the world reshapes itself around clarity. There were moments I missed being the easy one, the agreeable one, the dependable one. Those roles came with praise. But praise that costs yourself. Respect is expensive. I chose respect. With that choice came a deeper relationship with myself. I listened to my body, honored my limits, trusted my instincts. I stopped explaining my intuition away. Intuition is memory stored in the body. Mine remembered everything my mind tried to forget. I paid attention to how I felt around people, energized, neutral, drained. Those signals guided me better than logic ever had. I built a life that felt lighter, not perfect, not dramatic, just honest. I surrounded myself with people who spoke directly, who apologized when they were wrong, who did not joke at my expense. I no longer confused chaos with connection. That alone changed how safe my world felt. Sometimes I reflected on how close I came to staying small, how easily I could have laughed off that wedding moment, swallowed. It told myself it did not matter. I might still be doing that today. The thought sent a chill through me because staying small is not neutral. It is costly. It costs your voice, your joy, your sense of self. Leaving that table was the bravest thing I ever did, even though no one clapped, even though no one saw it. Bravery does not need witnesses, it needs honesty. As I moved forward, I realized how many people were watching quietly, not to judge but to learn. Friends told me later that my story helped them set boundaries, leave unhealthy relationships, speak up for themselves. That humbled me because I never set out to be an example. I just chose myself, and that choice rippled outward. I thought about forgiveness again, not in terms of Lily, but in terms of myself. Forgiving myself for believing love meant endurance. For forgiving myself for staying, for forgiving myself for hoping. Hope is not weakness. Hope only becomes dangerous when it is not paired with action. I paired mine with boundaries. That balance changed everything. I accepted that some relationships only exist to teach you how to leave. Not everyone is meant to stay. That realization brought peace. I stopped trying to rewrite the past. I focused on honoring the present. My days felt full without being overwhelming. My nights felt calm without being empty. I slept deeply. That alone felt like victory. The wedding memory was now just one chapter, not the whole book. It no longer defined me, it refined me. If you are listening and you feel like you are standing on the edge of a decision that scares you, let me tell you this. Growth rarely feels like relief at first. It feels like loss, like uncertainty, like stepping into silence. But on the other side of that silence is yourself. Not the version shaped by expectation, but the one shaped by truth. You will not recognize her immediately, but you will feel her steady, clear, unafraid. Choosing yourself does not make you hard. It makes you whole. And wholeness is the kind of strength no one can take from you. This is the part of the story where people usually expect a big ending, a final showdown, a dramatic apology, a perfect family photo that proves everything worked out. But real life does not tie itself up like that. Real life ends quietly with understanding, with ownership, with peace that does not need permission. By the time I reached this point, I was no longer counting sections or phases or lessons, I was just living. And that in itself felt like the greatest victory. I woke up one morning and realized I had not thought about Lily in days. Not out of bitterness, not out of avoidance, just absence. And that absence did not feel empty. It felt spacious, like a room finally cleared of clutter. That was when I knew I was free. Free from rehearsing conversations. Free from imagining outcomes. Free from waiting for someone else to change. Freedom did not come with fireworks. It came with calm mornings, calm decisions, calm relationships. And calm had once scared me because calm meant no distractions. And no distractions meant facing myself. But by now I liked who I was becoming. I trusted her. I trusted the woman who listened to discomfort instead of burying it. The woman who left tables where she was not welcomed. The woman who no longer begged for crumbs and called it love. That trust changed how I moved through the world. I did not rush. I did not overgive. I did not stay silent when something felt wrong. I spoke gently but clearly, and when people did not like it, I let them feel that I did not fix it. That was new. I used to believe that if someone was uncomfortable, it was my responsibility. Now I understood that discomfort is sometimes the price of honesty, and honesty is kinder than resentment. Lily and I crossed paths one last time in a way that mattered. It was not planned. We ran into each other unexpectedly in a place that had nothing to do with family or obligation, no audience, no history hanging in the air, just two people. She looked older, not in age, but in awareness, like someone who had been forced to look at themselves without filters. We talked briefly about neutral things. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said, "I did not realize how much you held everything together until you stopped." That was it. No apology, no defense, just truth. I nodded and said, "I did not either." And in that moment, there was no anger left. Only understanding. Sometimes people do not hurt you because they are cruel. They hurt you because they are careless with what they assume will never leave. And when it does leave, they are forced to feel the weight they ignored. I wished her well sincerely, not because I owed her forgiveness, but because I no longer needed resentment. Resentment is heavy. I had already carried enough. As I walked away from that encounter, I felt something settle, closure, not the kind people talk about, but the kind you give yourself when you stop waiting for someone else to make it right. My life now is quieter than it used to be, but it is fuller. I choose my days, I choose my people, I choose my boundaries, and every choice feels like a small act of self-respect. There are moments I still think about that kitchen, the clatter of plates, the hum of voices on the other side of the wall, the feeling of being hidden. But now when I think of it, I do not see a woman being diminished. I see a woman waking up, That moment did not break me. It freed me because it showed me exactly where I stood. And instead of begging for a better seat, I stood up and left. That is the part people forget. You do not need permission to leave. You do not need a perfect reason. You do not need consensus. You only need honesty. Honesty about how you feel, honesty about what you deserve, honesty about what you can no longer accept. Everything else follows. If you are listening to this and you feel unseen, unheard, pushed to the edges of your own life, listen closely. You are not invisible. You are not dramatic. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong people. And the moment you stop asking and start choosing yourself, your life will change. Maybe not overnight, maybe not loudly, but permanently. People will adjust, or they will fade. Either way, you will breathe easier. You will sleep better. You will laugh without scanning faces. You will feel safe in your own skin. That is not selfish. That is survival, turning into self-respect. The quiet revenge was never about punishment. It was about refusal. Refusing to stay where I was not valued. Refusing to carry what was never mine. Refusing to disappear to keep others comfortable. And in that refusal, I found myself whole, steady, unafraid. This story does not end with applause. It ends with a woman sitting at her own table, surrounded by people who see her not because she begged for space, but because she chose it. And if there is one thing I hope you take from this, let it be this. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to be cruel to be strong. You do not have to destroy to reclaim yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up quietly, walk away with dignity, and never look back. That choice will echo longer than any confrontation ever could. And once you make it, you will never again accept a seat where you do not belong.